The life story of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a small, one-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky, to Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln. His family was poor, and life was a constant struggle. His father, a hard-working farmer and carpenter, moved the family to Indiana in 1816, seeking better opportunities. But hardship followed them. In 1818, when Abraham was just 9 years old, his mother died from milk sickness, a tragic event that left a lasting impact on him. His father remarried a kind and loving woman named Sarah Bush Johnston, who treated young Abraham as her own child. She encouraged his love for learning, even though formal schooling was rare on the frontier. Despite having less than a year of formal education, Lincoln developed a deep love for reading. He would borrow books from neighbors, reading everything from the Bible to Aesop's fables, Shakespeare, and law books. He often walked miles just to get a book and read by the dim light of the fireplace after finishing his daily farm chores. His intellectual curiosity set him apart from other boys, and though he worked hard on the farm, his heart was always in learning and self-improvement. As he grew older, Lincoln took on various jobs to help support his family. He worked as a rail splitter, a store clerk, a postmaster, and a surveyor. In 1832, at the age of 23, he entered politics, running for the Illinois state legislature. Though he lost, the experience ignited his passion for public service. Around the same time, he served in the Black Hawk War, gaining leadership experience despite never seeing combat. 2 years later, he ran for office again and won. He quickly gained a reputation for his honesty and clear thinking, earning the nickname Honest Abe. During this time, Lincoln also pursued law, teaching himself by reading legal books. In 1836, he passed the bar exam and moved to Springfield, Illinois, where he built a successful law practice. He became known for his sharp legal mind, storytelling abilities, and sense of fairness. In 1842, he married Mary Todd, a well-educated woman from a wealthy Kentucky family. Their marriage was sometimes turbulent, but they deeply cared for each other. Together, they had 4 sons, though only one, Robert, survived to adulthood. Lincoln's political career continued to rise, and in 1846, he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. During his single term, he opposed the Mexican-American War, arguing that it was an unjust conflict. This stance was unpopular, and after his term ended, he returned to practicing law. For several years, he stayed away from national politics, but the growing debate over slavery pulled him back in. The passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, which allowed new territories to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery, outraged Lincoln. He believed slavery was morally wrong and should not be allowed to expand. This led him to join the newly formed Republican Party, which opposed the spread of slavery. In 1858, he ran for the U.S. Senate against Stephen A. Douglas. Their debates, known as the Lincoln-Douglas debates, drew national attention. Though Lincoln lost the election, his arguments against slavery made him a prominent figure in American politics. 2 years later, in 1860, Lincoln ran for president. His campaign emphasized his opposition to the expansion of slavery, but he reassured Southerners that he had no intention of abolishing it where it already existed. Still, his election victory sparked outrage in the South. Several Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. Lincoln took office on March 4, 1861, facing the most significant crisis in American history. Shortly after his inauguration, the Civil War began when Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in April 1861. Lincoln, committed to preserving the Union, called for troops to suppress the rebellion. The war was brutal, and the country was deeply divided. Lincoln faced enormous pressure, not only from Confederate forces but also from political opponents within his own government. Many doubted his leadership, and the war dragged on with heavy casualties. Initially, Lincoln focused solely on saving the Union, but as the war continued, he realized that ending slavery was necessary to achieve lasting peace. On January 1, 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that enslaved people in Confederate-held territories were free. While the proclamation did not immediately free all enslaved people, it transformed the war's purpose, making the fight about human freedom as well as preserving the nation. It also allowed black soldiers to join the Union Army, strengthening its forces. As the war raged on, Lincoln's leadership was tested again and again. The Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863 was a turning point, and later that year, Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address, a brief but powerful speech that redefined the war as a struggle for democracy and equality. His words, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth," became one of the most famous statements in American history. Despite his successes, Lincoln faced fierce opposition. Many Northerners were tired of the war, and in 1864, he faced a tough re-election campaign against former Union General George McClellan. At one point, Lincoln believed he would lose, but key Union victories, particularly General William Tecumseh Sherman's capture of Atlanta, shifted public opinion. Lincoln won re-election in a landslide, vowing to see the war through to the end. By early 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. On April 9, 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses South Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The Civil War was over. Lincoln now turned his focus to reuniting the nation. Instead of punishing the South, he wanted a lenient Reconstruction process that would bring the states back together peacefully. He urged Americans to forgive and move forward, stating in his second inaugural address, "With malice toward none, with charity for all." But Lincoln would not live to see the nation rebuilt. On the evening of April 14, 1865, just 5 days after the war ended, he attended a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. During the performance, John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, entered the presidential box and shot Lincoln in the back of the head. He was carried across the street to a boarding house, where he died the next morning. The nation was in shock. Lincoln's assassination was a tragic end to an extraordinary life. He had guided the country through its darkest hour and laid the foundation for a new era of freedom. His leadership, wisdom, and unwavering belief in equality left a lasting legacy. The 13th Amendment, which permanently abolished slavery, was passed later in 1865, fulfilling his greatest goal. Today, Abraham Lincoln is remembered as one of America's greatest presidents. His rise from humble beginnings to the highest office in the land is a testament to the power of perseverance and integrity. His speeches, his policies, and his deep commitment to justice continue to inspire people around the world. More than 150 years after his death, Lincoln's legacy remains a guiding light for democracy, unity, and the pursuit of a better future for all.